Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 18. Well, same as before, even though I really should be making a time-lapse video, or just simply make a time jump between episodes, all in order to start chipping away at our debt, I still didn't do it. There are a couple reasons. One is that I really wanted to get started on the railroad construction, and since you've all seen the thumbnail, you already know that is one of the highlights for this outing. The other reason is that I really wanted to ensure that all the houses are equipped to accept residents, which includes giving them a place to shop, and a place to satisfy their need for culture. And if you remember, we also needed to sort out the last remaining issues in the construction hub, which should all be dealt with today. Once I'm sure that we can let the game run for a couple years without any input, then I will do that time skip episode. Before we get started, if this is not your first video from this channel, you already know what to expect. If you want to be kept up to date, please consider subscribing, and if you like what you see, leaving a like will also help letting me know what to focus on. But enough talking, let's get into it. First things first, I forgot to reconnect these demolition offices, and we need them to finish setting up the construction hub. If you remember, we needed to break the asphalt plant's driveway in two, so it can accept a footpath connection. I also forgot to restart the farm. We needed to stop it so the vehicles inside can be repaired. Now that it's done, we could resume operations. Next, I was reminded to build a garbage collection point for the new houses. Good catch. I still keep forgetting these things. In the last episode, I sent 2 oil trucks to the second office. We only really need one until we start giving it more jobs to do. While it's only refueling its neighbor, it only needs one. Here, I decided to give this traffic light the schedule that could actually handle all directions equally, but in a little bit, I will discover that it doesn't have power. Yep, they are not working. Later on we will build a substation since we will need it for other things, but for now, let's just stick to using signs. Also, I am considering building a roundabout there, but there really isn't enough room to make one that would actually work good. And without having access to some kind of lane management tool, like we do with some of the more advanced mods in city skylines, even the best possible roundabout in this game will be woefully inefficient. So while it would look good, for that particular intersection that ship has sailed. And we have the first inhabitant in the student dormitory. For now, I decided to up the loyalty requirement so much, that nobody would be able to move in. I really don't want to receive a flood of complaints coming in from students. And the asphalt plant driveway is gone. We can rebuild it now, making sure it has a node we can use in the middle of it. There. Now we can build the bus station, and both production facilities will be in walking range. Instead of tearing up the roads to build a stop, I just opted for the small bus station. Should require a bit less work on our part. It can even reach the incinerator. Won't hurt to give that one multiple sources of workers. Speaking of the incinerator, let's continue with the recycling research. I also noticed that we have a much lower happiness average these days. I suspected it was mostly because of the deteriorating houses people have to live in. To combat this, I decided to start renovating some of them. The innermost housing block is done, and I could have let people in at this point without issues. But to be honest, I wanted to wait for the garbage collection to be sorted, so I waited. Here, I got an idea. We have two entrances to these construction offices. We could use one as an entrance, and the other as an exit exclusively with one-way roads. If we upgrade that dirt road, we can easily do it. Well, it's time for another loan, I'm afraid. And since we are still in construction mode, we are just about breaking even. Once things settle down, we will be in a much better position. And while looking at the teacher loyalties, most of them were at 70%. Time to use that as the minimum requirement to be a teacher. Alright, the garbage collection for these houses is done. We need to set up the different recycling bins, and then we can open the two houses that can reach the important services. Well, as soon as the two footpath segments that will put the houses in range are done. Shouldn't take too long now. And at last, we can join OPEC. As far as I can tell, it really only affects the crude oil when it comes to the import-export prices, but given that I plan on building an export pipeline in the future, not having to rely on volatile market forces will be a welcome feature. Well, since we have nothing better to do at the moment, guess what's coming? That's right. Time to do some decorating. The construction bus station is done. We can at last set up the line to ferry workers in from the city. Six minibuses should be enough. Also, now that the permanent depot is complete, we can get rid of the temporary ones. Okay, time to research the actual recycling tech. After this, citizens should be able to start sorting their own rubbish a bit better, separating the different kinds into individual containers. And it seems the garbage dump for the incinerator output is under renovation. To prevent a potentially fatal traffic jam, let's send the garbage truck away, so buses can enter. We might even be better off not giving the truck a full load order to prevent this in the future. And at this point, the construction hub is fully operational. We have workers and materials everywhere we need them. We can tell the offices to stop going to the border altogether, and only rely on the local supply of things. The new houses are all covered by the garbage collection point, so we can safely open those who can reach the center of town. And it seems it was just in time. We had about 40 unhoused adults already. Here, I wanted to see how it would look if we covered these dirt patches with some green grass. Give me a second while I try to cover one up completely. Yep, definitely not the best. These grass tiles really need something to act as a border on the outer edge of the area they meant to cover, otherwise they look kind of bad. Using the other grass planters is also not the best solution. They don't really do well when tiled together. I suppose we could have one of them in the middle, and fill the outer edges with some low bushes to hide the brown dirt. For now, I left this place alone. We will revisit it at some later date. Now that the construction offices finally ran out of things to do, let's continue renovating the old houses to give the overall happiness a small boost. And speaking of construction, I think it's time to really get started on the railroads. Since we have the smallest and most inefficient kind of track layer, we should be able to keep making money while working our way toward the border crossing to buy the EDK 300. Also, I did learn my lesson when it comes to supplying the building materials to the RCO from the last series. Tracks layers often come back with some materials left over, and they just dump those back into the office. Not a problem for gravel or the electro components, but it is for the rest. To make sure they have access to those materials at all times, we need a small open storage connected to it. Also, as you can see, I decided to finally build a permanent demolition office. Originally I wanted it to be in front of the construction offices, but that place is now occupied by power poles, so it had to go next to them instead. And since the CO roads are all upgraded, I also gave them the one-way designations to keep the traffic a bit more organized. Now that all 3 fuel distribution offices are done, we can set them up to refuel each other. We just needed one more truck in the last office, and we can set up the daisy chain. Alright, the footpath is gone at the RCO. We can build that open storage for it, and start storing materials that will not be affected by that behavior I talked about earlier, where track layers dump stuff out, creating an imbalance in the stored materials. Also, one of the tracks had to be moved a little bit to make room for it. Well, we do have enough stuff piled up in the office to get started, I think. Time to release the beast. And off it goes. It will take quite a long time to reach the customs house, but I would rather wait. If we set up a separate office at the border, we would need to supply it with workers, which we have a lot of locally in town. I suspect it would have to be foreign workers in the end to be efficient, which would mean an even more expensive job in the end. So I'd rather wait a long time, but cut down on the expenses. Before we leave the track layer to do its job, let's make sure it will actually laser focus on reaching the border. We should make sure that the relevant track segments are all set to high priority, so it will choose those whenever it reaches a fork along the way. I already did some of this a long time ago, but we did make changes since then, so it's better to double check. Well, at this point, it is out of our hands. All we can do is leave it alone, and let it do its job as best it can. We still had a couple apartment blocks out of range for some of the services, so let's remedy that next. They can't reach the cinema, so we will need some kind of a cultural building. How about the Palace of Communism? It's a nice tall one, another great addition to the town skyline. Let's not forget about shopping. Some of them are out of range for the shopping center too, and I did some tests. Even if we upgraded all the footpaths to the best one possible, they would still be unable to reach it. So we need a local shop to compensate. After making sure that this one has at least 2 parking spots for cargo drop-offs, we can safely place it. As usual, the shop will need a place to store large amounts of meat, so we don't need to make deliveries too frequently. But, to be able to place the freezer better, we should flip the main building around, so the connection is in a better place. Time to check on the school. And it seems 70% loyalty for teachers is a perfectly acceptable requirement. We can do the same for all educational facilities, ensuring the maximal amount of loyalty for new citizens when they enter the workforce. And the new demolition office is done. We can set up the different pickup and drop-off points for it, and then send over the vehicles. Also, it seems it doesn't have a power substation in range. We really should give it one. We can store some fuel for it inside, and not make its fleet of vehicles rely on gas stations. Okay, time for the next waste management research. How about we do steel recovery next? We have a little bit of metal scrap from time to time, would be nice to make use of it other than selling it. Well, time to send over the demolition vehicles. And we have more parking spots than machines at the moment, so we can fill those in with more. Maybe we should use something newer than these rickety old W50 FAs. The rest of the spots can be filled up with some more garbage trucks to speed up the cleaning. But, we have a new model with more speed, so it's time to replace the older models. Okay, this intersection is starting to be a bit of a handful. We will need to do something about it. As soon as we have a rush of construction vehicles, things get busy real fast. Nice. The RCO outside storage is done. We can fine-tune the deliveries, so we only deliver gravel and components to the office directly, the rest will go into the new building. And we are now officially a member of OPEC. Since we have no tourism right now, we can forego the advertisements, and just do the power connections next. Well, the intersection is in range of the new substation. Time to put in that traffic light. If we give all directions their own individual step in the schedule, we should be able to handle the traffic better. Not the perfect solution, but when it comes to traffic there is no such thing, other than lowering the volume. You know what they say, adding more lanes only delays the inevitable. The only way to permanently fix this place is to use less vehicles, and start using trains as soon as possible. And we are already working on that. Okay, we have a lot of fuel and bitumen stored up. I think it's time to expand the lines with a couple more trucks, so we can keep on top of it, and make the most out of it. "20 seconds on this traffic light seem to be doing an okay job, let's give 30 seconds a try." Nice, we have a great new addition to the town in the form of the Palace of Communism. But, it is not in range of the local garbage collection point, so we need to add in a couple footpaths to go over the road. And while those are under construction, we should place a temporary dirt one too. While the main store is unfinished, the freezer is done, so we can at least start filling that one up. But before we could buy the truck for it, we need to send these tankers out to sell our precious fuel and bitumen. As usual, we ask the truck to fully unload at the freezer, so it doesn't have to run continuously. And I think this is pretty much it. Apart from sorting out the last couple deliveries for the store once it finishes, I think we are at a point where we can safely let the game run on autopilot, and maybe do that time skip episode at last. Right now, the biggest expenditure will be the occasional renovations, and the railroad construction of course. But it's so low volume, I think our exports are more than capable of keeping on top of it. I don't want to make any promises, but I hope that we can do the time-lapse episode next time. Would be kind of relaxing to do one of those. Anyways, if all goes well, and we can push our debt down enough, we should be able to get started on the next town, which will deal with steel production next. I already have some ideas about the locations of the relevant buildings, including the town itself, so we only need to knuckle down, and get to work on it. Anyways, if you haven't done it already, I'd love it if you subscribe to the channel, and leaving a like would also let me know that this video was worth making. If you feel that it was good enough, and you can afford it, please consider going to my Ko-fi page, which you can find in the description, and donate an amount that you feel is appropriate. And if you did like what you've seen, there should be links to some of my other videos and playlists on the screen. Thank you for your support, and I'll see you in the next one.